For more, Professor C. Raja Mohan, Visiting Research Professor, Institute of South Asian Studies, National University of Singapore, and Dr. Victor Gao, Vice President, Center for China and Globalization, Chair and Professor at Suzhou University, joins us now for the discussion. Well, thanks very much, Professors, for joining us this evening. First, a big picture question, which I would like input from both of you. And perhaps we'll start first with Professor Mohan. PM Modi appearing as the current front runner, but what might a third consecutive win mean for India-China relations?
Look, I think in his interview to the Newsweek magazine recently, Prime Minister Modi underlined, after a long time, I would say, the importance of India's relationship with China, why India wants a better relationship with China. And if we can resolve the problems on the border today and bring back peace and tranquility, the relationship can be taken to a high level. So I think in this interview, Prime Minister Modi is putting forward a positive vision. And I think if he comes back strongly after the elections, I think there will be a moment for China and India to take a fresh look at the stalled a stalemate in a political and military relationship and try and advance it one more time.
Right. And Professor Gao, I mean, is that something that you'd agree with Professor Mohan, that, using a set of fresh eyes to look at these stalled relations?
Well, personally, I wish the Indian election great success, and who emerges as the leader of India for the next term will be fully recognized by China, and China and India need to deal with each other as an equal and making efforts to overcome the territorial disputes which do exist between China and India. But these disputes should not hijack China-India relations, and both countries will serve their own people's purposes better if we can rededicate ourselves to peace and development. And especially in the world of today, war is really a real specter for many countries in the world. And China and India being the two largest populations in the world, each having more than 1.4 billion people, a war is unthinkable. A war will be a disaster. Only by embracing peace for China and India will both nations emerge as final victors. And we want to really bring benefits for the Indian nation on the one hand and the Chinese nation on the other hand. So the election may be a chance to rededicate all of us to peace and development between China and India.
And how do you see it, Professor Mohan? Because in terms of the amount of history, right, that goes behind it, a significant amount, historical, contemporary, political, economic baggage, all of that will certainly burden Modi's third term and, and his relations with China. I mean, that's inevitable, isn't it?
No, I think there is an opportunity. I think that's what statecraft is about, statesmanship is about. That to rise above the immediate difficulties and to look ahead and to look forward. In fact, when he came to power, Prime Minister Modi was very keen to transform the relationship with China. But unfortunately, a series of military crises in 2014 and 2017 and 2020 have created a cloud. And I think if the two leaders are willing to take a fresh look, in fact, we've been talking about resolving the current impasse on the boundary. There have been about 20 rounds of military dialogue. So I think there are a couple of issues that are left. And if there is political will to restore peace and tranquility on the border, I think there will be a moment to really make a fresh start in the bilateral relationship in the next few months.
And Professor Gao, I mean, having that political will, I guess part of that will be how Prime Minister Modi will have to have this stable yet somewhat delicate relationship with China to manage. And that is quite a huge task.
Well, I tend to disagree. I think for both China and India, our overriding priorities should be developing our economy, to make sure that the Chinese people and the Indian people respectively can move up the ladder and become wealthier. And for the Indian people, they become more industrialized and manufacturing becomes a larger proportion of their economy. And both China and India really need to be fully engaged in the AI revolution, digital economy, etc. So this is the worst time for China and India to talk about or even to think about war against each other. We need to really be fully engaged in economic development, globalization, 2.0, for example, and then fully engage in this digital revolution and the AI revolution. There are lots of things that China and India can talk about in beefing up cooperation, and the territorial disputes, as I mentioned, do exist, but the territorial disputes between China and India are not created by India or by China. They are the leftovers by the British Indian Empire. And neither China nor India should be held hostage by that. Why should India and China suffer the consequences of the British imperialism in India? It is really not befitting the wisdom of the Chinese nation as well as the Indian nation. I truly believe China and India, with thousands of years of civilization behind us, will be able to come up with a wise way to engage with each other, to solve the territorial disputes between us and become real friends and partners in globalization, modernization, industrialization, and digital revolution and AI revolution.
Professor Mohan, China versus India, I mean, in a way that the want and a desire to lead the developing nations of the global south, I mean, who is better placed? I mean, is there an answer for that?
Look, I think Chinese economy is almost 4 times bigger than India's economy. So in a way, China can bring a lot more resources into the efforts to transform the state of economies of the developing world or the global south. India is emerging. India is well behind China, but India has resources of its own. So within its own neighborhood, in some parts of Africa, there are niche areas, for example, on the digital public infrastructure, areas where India can contribute. But I think the two countries bring their own separate strengths into the thing. But in terms of the overall financial resources, China, of course, is better placed. And my sense is this is not I don't think it should be viewed as a competition between India and China for the global south. Today, the global south, I don't think they're just waiting for someone to take leadership. Each one of them today are strong and have the agency to bargain, to demand, and to seek development what suits them. So I think we should not see the whole global south from the lens of a India-China competition, and it is not a choice for them between India and China. They would go to whoever gives them better terms at this point.
And just before we wrap up this discussion, Professor Gao, perhaps you want to jump in here?
Oh, yes. I think 45 years ago, the Indian economy and the Chinese economy were more or less on the par with each other. And now the Chinese economy, allow me to add the new information, is more than 5 times larger than the Indian economy. It means China must have done something right over the past 4 decades and a half to speed up its economic development. And I think China and India can really share experiences, success stories and failure stories with each other and with many other countries in the developing world. And I think for China and India, we really need to deal with each other as an equal. And China is larger than India as an economy right now, but India has huge potentials. And I do respect the Indian civilization and culture and history for thousands of years. And for thousands of years, China and India had no problem with each other. The problem created by the British Indian colonists were results of the expansion of Indian empire under the British rule. So this had nothing to do with India. It had nothing to do with China. And we need to move beyond this bad legacy left over by the British Indian Empire. I truly believe with the right wisdom and economic development, China and India will become real friends and partners in pursuit of happiness for both the Chinese people and the Indian people, and set up a good example for the whole world.
Thank you very much, both of you, for your wisdom. I was just talking to C. Rajamohan, visiting research professor, Institute of South Asian Studies, National University of Singapore, as well as with Dr. Victor Gao, Vice President, Center for China and Globalization.